one point we were trying to write songs and they were going, oh, we've got to sound like the Queen record, we've got to sound like this one and that one. And I thought to myself, it's kind of weird that we're now being influenced by the bands that we influenced. Don't you think we got a problem?
Things started falling apart a bit after that, for Never Say Die. Great title to have, isn't it? And then you break up. Ozzy went, and then he came back, and it was all a bit chaotic. And we had another singer come in, write a couple of songs with him. A guy from Savile Brown, I think he was, and Fleetwood Mac. We wrote a couple of songs with him, and it just weren't right. He was singing, it just didn't sound right for us. And Ozzy came back, which was great. But he came back 2 days before we were due to go to bloody record the album, which we didn't have, because he couldn't use any of them songs that we've done with somebody else. It had to be Ozzy involved. So Bill ended up singing one of them, Swinging the Chain. And it was really hard. We went to Toronto. I booked the studio. We went to Toronto because it was a tax thing as well, getting out of the country. And because I was the one who always had to book the studio, you know. They looked to me to do that, where we're going to go and all the rest of the stuff. So off we go to the studio in Toronto with no music, and we rented a cinema. It was freezing cold, absolutely froze stiff. We had to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning to start writing a track to record on the night. So it was really difficult, really hard. So that album was put together sort of like that, really. It was quite a difficult time.
was stoned all the time, and so I didn't really appreciate what was going on around me. And I was into the sex, drugs, and the rock and roll was paying for my sex and the drugs.
Everything was distorted, and you know, really they were. When looking back now, I can look back at that, you know, and go, well, that was a pretty sad lifestyle, Bill.
We were doing too much, and we got to too much of a state that we couldn't function, you know, properly on it. And you were getting angry and aggressive, and, you know, it's sort of, because we were doing too much of everything.
Down. welcome to part 8 of my Black Sabbath album deep dive series. Today I'm talking about their 8th studio album and their last with Ozzy Osbourne for many, many years. Never Say Die with an exclamation point. This was released on September 29th, 1978. This is my original CD copy. And then this is the remastered version that came out several years ago. I think in 2014 maybe. But anyway, this is one of the most maligned albums in Black Sabbath's entire discography. And I've never understood it. I've always loved this album. It's certainly, to me, it's not as good as the first 6 albums, but I still think it's a very enjoyable album. And I've never understood why people hate on this album so much. And not every fan. I've had a lot of comments of people who have already told me that you like this album. But before I'd heard it, I always had the impression this was a terrible Black Sabbath album. Even the band themselves, Ozzy Osbourne and the band, I don't think they speak very glowingly of this album, but it really is. It's got all the elements that make Black Sabbath great. It's heavy, it's progressive in moments. There's certainly some experimentation, but I think that it all works. There's not a single song on here that I consider to be subpar. Certainly, I don't know that I would stack any of these songs up against their greatest tracks from the first 6 albums, but it is not a bad album. I do actually like this album a lot, and I like it more than Technical Ecstasy, as a matter of fact. Now, what had happened was, at the time that Black Sabbath was coming together to record this album, Ozzy Osbourne decided he was leaving the band. He felt the band was uninspired, that they were burned out. He wasn't inspired by any of the music that the band was creating. So he said, I'm out of here and I'm going to form my own band, Blizzard of Oz. Well, that never happened. But in the meantime, the band recruited Dave Walker, who had been a vocalist for Savoy Brown and Fleetwood Mac, and they began writing songs with him. And about a week or two before the band were going to go into the studio to record as a new quartet, Ozzy Osbourne changed his mind and decided that he was coming back to the band. The only problem was that he refused to sing on any of the material that the band had written with Dave Walker. And the band, it was like, okay, now we got to come up with new music from scratch. So Tony Iommi was a little pissed off because they had just written an album's worth of songs that Ozzy was refusing to sing on, but they really wanted Ozzy back in the band, so they came up with more or less a new batch of songs. Swing in the Chain was a song they'd written with Dave Walker. Ozzy refused to sing on it, so Bill Ward sung. And the song Breakout, Ozzy refused to sing on that, felt it was a bit too jazzy. And so that was just left as an instrumental. But the other tracks, from what I understand, were written fresh in the studio once Ozzy rejoined, and they didn't have a lot of time to write new material either, because it was like 2 weeks before they were going to go into the studio, and now they were up against it, having to write more songs. So how did the album shake out? Let's get into the songs on this album. It kicks off with one of my favorite songs on this album, one of my favorite all-time Black Sabbath songs, the title track, Never Say Die. The chorus reminds me of the chorus from Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, but otherwise it's just a kick-ass, tight little rock song, and I love it. There's no bombast about it. There's no pretensions. They are just doing what they do best, and it's a kick-ass song. I love Never Say Die. The next track, I think, is a song, people who don't like this album and who crap on this album, I think this is one of the songs that they point to because of the chorus where Ozzy just, Johnny Blade. And I think for some reason that rubs people the wrong way. I actually like this song. I think it's another heavy rock track. yeah, it does sound different from the first 6 albums, but I think the whole doom and gloom thing was getting a little played out, and so I certainly applaud Black Sabbath for trying to stretch out and try some new things. But I do like Johnny Blade. I'm one of the people who I don't find it annoying, and I think already we've got a pretty solid start to the album. Track number 3, Junior's Eyes, was written or rewritten to reflect the fact that Ozzy's dad had just passed away. I love the drum rhythm, that groove that they find at the beginning of this song. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite moments. It's like, is this Black Sabbath? But it sounds so cool. It sounds so unlike anything Black Sabbath had attempted, but it totally works for me. The song does meander a little bit as we get deeper into it, but I still, at the heart, I love Junior's Eyes. A Hard Road is another kick-ass heavy song, and that's why I don't understand. Like, this sounds like Black Sabbath. This is not Black Sabbath going off into some really bizarre, completely off-brand style of music. Hard Road is very heavy. It sounds like classic Sabbath, and I love that song. The first song on side 2 is Shockwave, and this is another heavy Black Sabbath tune. I love this one. It has all the elements, anything you would want from a great Ozzy Black Sabbath song, I think, delivers on Shockwave. Dance is another heavy tune that has some progressive elements, but I think it works. It's interesting to hear Ozzy and the band coming up with a song about a dancer of all things, but it just shows how their lyrical content and their themes had evolved over time. They were trying to talk a little bit more about grounded topics rather than fantasy and the occult. Over to You is another great heavy metal track. It's a great solid song. I love Bill Ward's drumming, and there's just kind of a rawness to Bill Ward's drum sound that I absolutely love on this album. And to hear interviews about him talking about he was so wasted out of his mind, I think his drumming is fantastic on this album. And there's just part of the production, there's kind of a rawness. The band went to Toronto to record the album, and it was in a very cold environment, and they were not happy with the sound that they were getting. But I don't have any problems with the production on it. If anything, to me, it seems a little bit stripped down on some of these songs and a little raw to my imperfect ears anyway. The next track is Breakout, which is a bit of jazzy fusion, I guess, Black Sabbath style. This is probably my least favorite song on the album, which is not to say I dislike it. I don't dislike it. It's just not one of my favorites. But again, Black Sabbath expanding their sound, taking some risks. And the final track, Swing and the Change, which I really wish Ozzy would have sung on. I mean, I can appreciate Bill Ward giving it his best, but I think this would have been a much better song with Ozzy on vocals because it's heavy. It sounds like Black Sabbath. The only thing that doesn't sound like Black Sabbath is Bill Ward's vocal. So I really miss Ozzy on this track because this could have been an excellent, excellent Black Sabbath song, as it is with Bill Ward's vocals. It's very good. It just could have been so much better. So anyway, that's my take on Never Say Die. Let me know what you think in the comment section. And as always, thank you for watching. The next episode, we will be getting into the Ronnie James Dio period of Sabbath. Take care.